for watching Melodies in Flow, brought to you by Studio 125 Multimedia Complex. I'm Pete Barlow, and a little bit about myself. I'm a stand-up comedian, and really what got me into this very long journey, when I was a kid, I saw Jurassic Park, and I left the theater, and I told my parents, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And they were like, oh, you want to be an actor? But really what I meant was I wanted to be chased by dinosaurs throughout, like, a park for the rest of my life. That sounded like a fun adulthood to me. But I couldn't explain that to my parents. So I was like, yeah, I'll be an actor. I was living in a town called Sydney, Ohio at the time. There were not a lot of acting opportunities, but there was the one big Christmas show that happened every year. So I auditioned for that, and I got a very small part. And just to dispel any myths, I have no natural talent as an actor, singer, or dancer. It was just sort of like, we need bodies. But I had a small part in the show. I had like one funny line in it. And I remember as a kid, that feeling of an entire audience of like hundreds of people laughing simultaneously at a delivery. I was like, okay, this is the rush I want for the rest of my life. So no more dinosaurs. I'm no longer interested in being chased by dinosaurs. So as, you know, like from that age all the way up until about high school, it was always like in the back of my mind, like, oh, I would love to do that, to be a comedian. Like I watched Comedy Central like the same way that most kids watched ESPN growing up. It was like, okay, those are my heroes. But I was always too scared to do it. And then I remember in high school, we had what's called Writers Week. And throughout the whole week, you kind of get out of class and you get to hear writers talk about what they do. And one of the writers who came was a slam poet. And I'd never seen slam poetry before in my life. But he was just, because I thought of poetry as just very dry and morose. And he went up there and he was very funny and he was a very physical comedian. And so I was like, okay, cool. I want to do slam poetry. That's a good outlet. And there's, at this point, I was growing up in Chicago. There's a thriving slam poetry scene in Chicago. So I was able to do that for a while. And I tried doing serious poems from the heart, but they never landed the same way as the comedic poems. Usually the poems where I was kind of making fun of slam poetry or like, you know, making fun with slam poetry. So I was the comedic slam poet in my little circle. And I made it all the way to the National Poetry Slam in 2007. And from that point on, I stopped writing poetry. I think it was almost like symbolic, like, all right, you made it at the top of the mountain. You could keep trying this, but you're young, try new things. So right after the Nationals, I was junior in college, and my roommate at the time, he entered a last comic standing competition, and I went there just to support him. And some of the other friends that were there with me were like, yeah, Pete, you should sign up. I'm like, no, I don't have anything prepared. I'm like, no, but you're funny. Just tell your stories. So I signed up, and I wound up getting second place in that last comic standing competition. And it was like, oh, okay, you know, this is basically the same energy, the same style of writing as the slam poetry, just make it into more anecdotes. And there's, you know, you don't have to worry about like, you know, any like meter or anything like that. So then right after graduating college, I wound up joining the Army because that's what happens when you have a degree in film production. Thank you. And so right after I got out of AIT, get to my first duty station in coastal Georgia, just that urge is still there. It's like, I would love to get back into stand-up. I remember how good that felt. And so I started doing open mics in Savannah. And this is going to be like the cautionary tale. I went to an open mic in Savannah, and I thought I was just telling workplace jokes, just workplace humor. MC pulls me aside and goes, hi, I'm a vet. I come in peace. You cannot tell military humor. I'm like, why am I not telling military humor? It's like, yeah, you are. So it took me a while to kind of like find that voice of like, how can I reach the biggest audience? And that time was a decade and 4 months. But the point is, in that time, it was like, all right, listen, you can kind of like distinguish what's going to reach the biggest audience. So anyway, very, very long story short, last year, I visited a buddy of mine up in DC, and he's like, hey, while we're here, you're doing an open mic. I'm like, no, I'm not. It's like, yeah, you are. You've been whining for the last decade about how you want to get back into comedy, get back into comedy. So I did an open mic in Baltimore under a fake name because I was so sure I was going to bomb and be blacklisted by the entire comedy community because I was so unfunny. It's like, well, they'll blacklist Steve. They won't blacklist Pete. And if I bomb really bad, I can just go right back to Georgia and pretend like the whole thing never happened. I did really well. I was like, okay, that's a huge shock. There was like 7 people in the audience, but it was just that rush of getting back into it. And so I came back to Georgia, not as Steve, who was blacklisted, and then I found out that there actually was this small comedy scene in Augusta, Georgia. And so as I got through those connections, I started to meet other comedy like scenes in like Columbia, South Carolina, Athens, Georgia, Atlanta. Obviously is a huge showbiz town. And it's great because like in even our little quadrant of America, there's like all these comedy networks. And I've been so honored the fact that we all try to build each other up. There's never like this like tense animosity. We make fun of each other on stage, but off stage, we all support each other. And the highlight of this whole experience since I got back was comedian Cedric hosted a Next Comedy Icon competition, 10 weeks in Augusta. So thank you for that. My car sure appreciates getting to just drive 5 minutes instead of 5 hours. And I wound up winning it. And not for lack of talent. It was give it everything you've got kind of situation. But it was really a huge voice of support that it was like, all right, you're doing the right thing. Just keep on at this. Some of my comedy influences. My favorite stand-up comedian is Patton Oswalt. I think he's the funniest human being on earth. But my 3 biggest influences in terms of my style of comedy, John Mulaney, Maria Bamford. Maria Bamford is such an influence. It probably borders on plagiarism. So if I ever start making money off this, I'll just like send her a check every month. And then Mike Birbiglia, that same sort of absurd anecdotal style. Who are some of my favorite people I've worked with? Well, there's Ignatius Debo, of course. What? No, for real though. To give Ignatius Debo a shout out, I had a showcase. Speaking of people I've worked with that have been so instrumental in me continuing to do this. So EJ Mack is a stand-up comedian. He's now based in Atlanta, was based in Augusta at the time, but he was a really big proponent of like getting Augusta comedians together on showcases. So he put me on a showcase a year ago, and that's how I met Ignatius Debo. And I don't know if you know this, but it just like it meant a lot that like after the showcase, like you pulled me aside and started talking to me. And again, fittingly enough, since we're recording this on Veterans Day, I love the fact that like the veteran comedians out there, like we all support each other too, because it's like, all right, like we all know where we came from. We all have the exact same very dark sense of humor. But like meeting Debo was huge. There's this other guy. He was in the competition. I can't remember his name. He has only one arm. He's originally from South Carolina. If only he had a memorable stage name. Something like Black the Handicap or something like that. Anyway, yeah, but Black, amazing comedian. It's so cool. Like even like in a scene as small as Augusta, like you'll see people say, all right, this person's like made for the top. And so it's been great. Like this is not like it's like he's an up and comer. Like no, it's like some comedians like they just arrive on the scene like ready to go. So like trust me, like you will see Black the Handicap like in the marquee someday. But to give a shout out to people who are not sitting 5 feet away from me, the Columbia comedy scene has been very supportive. Specifically, comedian Pudgy. He's another one. Columbia is a small city. He's like, no, let's like make this a comedy city. And the entire Athens comedy scene. Specifically, shout out to Owen Hunt, so who's like kind of like the foundational like member of like the contemporary Athens comedy scene. And no one in Atlanta has put me on a showcase yet, so they can all go to hell. All right, so the set you are about to see, a great lesson for anyone, not just any comedian, is be the first to make the joke about yourself. Like, I feel like anyone who's a comedian can attest, it's like, we got into this because people made fun of us, And it was always this like this part of you. It's like, you know what? I'm the subject matter subject matter expert on me. I can make fun of me way better than any of you can. So like, especially if you're in a situation where you're gonna get roasted, it's like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna take all of the power from you, and I'm gonna tell the jokes myself. So the set you're about to see is just the fact that like anytime I've gotten on a stage, it's like, you look like bald white guy with glasses. And I just go on stage and it's like, you know what? I do look like bald white guy with glasses. I'll go the extra measure. I'll dress like bald white guy with glasses. Boom. Your move, Black the Handicap. Let's see. So another part of my set is that I've kind of become an actor. Like, I definitely just want this on the record. I do not think of myself as an actor. I'm a comedian who can memorize lines. Like, there is a difference. But you know what? It worked well for Robin Williams. So, but the point is, a lot, especially like in a smaller market, like they're always looking for actors. So I have had a few acting opportunities since moving to the South. And in some cases, I was very well cast. In some cases, I still maintain that I was miscast. So.
Good evening, 125. How's everybody doing? Let's give it up for our host. There we go. Let's give it up for JR for putting this all together. I am so honored to be just in this talented lineup. We have Black the Handicap, Ron G, Ignorant Ass Debo, and Pete Barlow. You get no extra credit for guessing which one of us is the token white comedian. Do you guys like my outfit?
Love it.
Folks, I have spent 2 years on the comedy circuit being told I look like Steve from Blue's Clues. So, if you can't beat him, join him. Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail. Mail! How you like me now, motherfuckers? True story, I have been mistaken for Steve Burns twice in my life. The first time I was like, no, I just look a lot like him. The second time I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna let you have it. I feel like you need the victory. Afterwards, he probably ran off to his friends like, guys, I just saw Steve from Blue's Clues at Atlanta at an open mic in the middle of the day. His career must really be in the dumps. Yeah, it sure is. This is not a Halloween costume, by the way. Life has just become so expensive that I've started an OnlyFans page where I do porn parodies of Nick Jr. shows. This is from an episode I called Blues Splooge. It appeals to millennials who are also into bestiality. I spray paint a dog blue and then have it lick peanut butter off of my genitals. I'm just joking. I'm allergic to peanut butter. I use Nutella. Sadly, dogs are allergic to chocolate, so I've gone through like 8 blues so far. But the point is I have a lot of subscribers, and that's what matters. Like a lot of you, I've spent the last 2 weeks closely watching the world news. It's very disturbing. There's been so much fighting, so much misinformation. Honestly, I've never seen us all so divided in my life. Obviously, the news story I'm talking about is that Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith have separated. If those two cannot make their weird, toxic marriage last, what hope do the rest of us have? Jada Pinkett Smith dated Tupac Shakur before marrying Will Smith. It's nice to know that she has a type. Rappers turned actors who were bad at dodging bullets in the 90s. There we go, some of you are getting it. Speaking of actors, the Screen Actors Guild strike is still going on. I know, because I've had 4 acting gigs this year. Don't worry, I'll be humbling myself shortly. Here's an important detail. I am not an actor. Directors are in such a desperate state right now that they are asking the age-old question, stand-up comedians, can they act? And the answer is, sometimes. Like, it's not lost on me that Robin Williams, Whoopi Goldberg, and Jamie Foxx were all stand-up comedians before winning Oscars. But on the other hand, we allowed Bert Kreischer to star in a movie this year, so we are living in sad times. To be fair, the first acting gig I was offered was a play. Did you all know plays are, like, still a thing? I was surprised as well. Earlier this year, out of nowhere, a woman calls me up and is like, "Hi, I saw your stand-up set. I'm directing a show right now. I have a part I think you'd be perfect for." "Awesome! What's the show?" "It's an all-black Christian gospel musical." I am so confused right now because everything you just said is the exact opposite of me. What is the part? Well, there is one white character. It's a socially awkward white man named Pete who has no game when talking to women. It's the role I was born to play. So I was in this musical, but the director wanted the show to be good, so she never asked me to sing or dance. I was there strictly as comic relief. And the biggest laugh I got was at the very end of the show. There's a funeral scene that turns into a big song and dance number. It makes more sense in context. But all I'm asked to do, this whole scene, while I'm surrounded by people doing intricate choreographed dances, is to stand in the back and clap like this. And then one of the actors grabs me by the hands and forces me to clap in sync with the music. Folks, it was very funny. It was also not in the script, nor was it rehearsed. It was just very necessary. The director was watching the show like, "Holy shit, I cast that part too well." A few months later, guy messages me on Facebook out of nowhere and he's like, "Hi, I saw your stand-up set. I'm making a short movie. I have a part I think you'd be perfect for." I was like, "Is it a socially awkward white man named Pete? Because I'm pretty good at that." He goes, "No, it's a violent sociopathic hitman in the mafia who kidnaps women." I have no idea what I've ever done on stage to deserve that, but cool. Folks, I know my range as an actor. I can play everything from a nerd to a slightly more nervous nerd. What I'm saying is that I'm the Daniel Day-Lewis of this generation. I also know, and as at least 25 of you can attest, I do not have a very intimidating voice. But I wanted to commit to this part, so I decided to do an accent. And I love Martin Scorsese movies, so I was going to do a New York accent. So I get on set, my first line is, "Take a seat," but like in a scary way, not a polite way. Director calls action and I go, "Take a seat!" Folks, it was in that moment that I realized I really cannot do a New York accent. I sounded like Bugs Bunny on helium. But the director did not say anything, so I just had to commit to it. Throughout the movie, I'm saying things like, "You better kill the cops, or else." It's important to note that this movie is not a comedy. And if you are ever interested in seeing my performance, I recommend waiting about a year, going on YouTube and searching "Worst Acting in Movie History." I'll probably be the top hit. Let us hope for an end to the actor strike. My name's Pete. That's been my set. Thank you very much.
I'll give it up for Pete Barlow.
My name's Pete. That's been the show. The socials are complicated because I just had a younger comedian explain to me how I can have a second Instagram account, and it's like, what? I could have been doing this the whole time. But in the meantime, if you're watching this in the present or the past, you can follow me on Instagram at GILOW, G.I.LOW. But I hope to soon have a Comedian Pete Barlow Instagram account. And you can also follow me on YouTube at Pete Barlow Stand-Up. Very cryptic name. I wanted to make sure no one could find me. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed Melodies and Flow. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope you tune in again. Enjoy the show.
love you.